And here we are. Thank you for joining us again with Marie Pinney for the second part of our Equip for the Journey series of conversations that are intended to really encourage homeschooling, encourage especially CC families as they are homeschooling their children who might have exceptional not only talents, but maybe exceptional needs along their path. I have often talked with families over the years about, how great CC is, but because my child is this, or because my child is looking forward at this, maybe CC is not the best fit. And I just want to open up conversation to really inspire families that what CC offers is so far beyond the subject knowledge and the subjects where it's foundations, essentials, or challenge, the particulars that our kids are studying, but it's really about those classical skills, which are really life skills benefiting our most studious child to the one that just wants to be outside doing all the things, the one that, we sometimes wonder, are we really doing the right thing here? CC is equipping those kids to go into the world and to think rightly and be able to process information well, assimilate that information, organize it, put eloquent words, and then present themselves in a way that is effective and is winsome and glorifies the Lord. And that's really the big picture of a classical model of education. Um, and so through that desire, Marie Penny and I have been talking over the years about our own challenges with our Jacobs. We chatted last month about just the challenges of those special kids and the needs that we moms have to really know our child and to humble ourselves so that we can effectively meet the needs of those special children. But Marie is going to continue with us today to get talk more in detail about homeschooling with CC, a dyslexic child. So Marie, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey with Jacob?
Sure. My name's Marie Pinney. I've been homeschooling with Classical Conversations for 20 years now. I have four children. My oldest has graduated from Regent University, and then I have two students at Liberty University. My Jacob, who I'm going to be talking about, my daughter Julia, and then I have one son, Joshua, who is in Challenge 3 in Bristow. And I don't know if you want me to say more.
Well, let's just get started. And so let's start at the beginning, getting directly into the details of the dyslexia. Before you ever had a dyslexia diagnosis, can you tell me about some of the struggles that you and Jacob experienced in your homeschooling?
Sure. I never once dreamed when Jacob was tiny, we were starting our academic journey together. It didn't even cross my mind that he could be dyslexic or have a learning challenge. My oldest son, David, he learned to read so easy. We did teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons, and it was so easy. And he loved to read, and he would go to bed reading at night. And I used to scoff at I would pass those $1,000 or $500 reading programs and think, why would anyone need that? It's so easy to teach your kid to read. Well, anyway, enter my next son, Jacob, who very intelligent child from very young age. But as soon as it was time, around four-ish, I don't, when my kids are tiny, I don't push a lot of academics, but I tried to, start to introduce the reading skills. Around four, he was not interested at all. So that was okay. We waited till five, and I was not upset with that. Didn't feel that there was a big problem. But at five, he had no interest in learning to read. um, he did have an interest in learning to write the alphabet, though. So I wasn't really concerned because I thought, well, the reading's going to come. Um, he, so then move on to six. He's writing letters, but can't really compose words. And when it came to sitting still on the couch to read a book, he loved hearing the stories, but he did not want to engage reading himself. So, by age 6, I was starting to feel like, oh, this is my diagnosis was I have a disobedient child. It wasn't that my son has a learning challenge. So from about age 6 to 7 into age 8, our homeschool became a very negative place. I'll just put it that way because I thought my son is disobedient. Also, I'm a bad teacher. We had a strained relationship, and he hated school, started to hate everything about what our homeschool was about, which made me so upset because, in my little head, this young mom I had dreamed that our homeschool would be a haven, this beautiful place of refuge and peace and all these things. And so my expectations were starting to be dashed. And in my head, it's this kid who is preventing us from having the peaceful, lovely homeschool. And so Jacob really, in many ways, in my head, I didn't know how much this was affecting me, but in my head, Jacob himself kind of became the enemy of my homeschool, which is a terrible place for your child to be. And he was preventing me from doing what I needed to accomplish with all my other 3 children in my homeschool. And I guess you could call that Jacob was an impediment to my successful homeschooling. And so, over a course of those years that I mentioned, the Lord brought me to a place where he needed to bring a humble spirit to me, and I needed to learn more about my son Jacob and reevaluate who he was as a person. So, I guess that's going to be the next where we're going
Yeah.
next.
Well, at any point in this time, Marie, did you suspect a learning challenge with
No,
Jacob?
not at all. Like it just, nobody said to me, hey, this kid might be being disobedient in your school specifically because he's got a blocked learning gate.
Sure.
Um,
So then what prompted you to go down this road to have him evaluated? What transpired?
right. So, um, at this stage, I would go to the Heave conventions every year, and I thought, well, what better place to ask questions about my son who just is struggling reading? So I stopped at a Heave booth and spoke with some of the people there, and they said it could just be very natural that a boy age 7 would be struggling reading, but with some of the stuff they heard me say about him, they recommended that it couldn't hurt at all to go get an evaluation. And one of the people they recommended was Dr. Verdilli in Leesburg. So around it was the summer. So his birthday's in May. So the summer he turned 8. I think it was that May we went and got a diagnosis from Dr. Verdilli.
What were some of the things that they heard, or what are some of how did that conversation with them go? I'm just curious for somebody who's, struggling in those really early stages and they are just confused. How did that
With Heave or
conversation with
Dr.
Heave? Yeah,
Verdilli?
with Heave.
With Heave. Right. So I just I spoke with gosh, I anyway, but I just mentioned some of the experiences that we were having at home, the just the reluctance to read, that he really liked to write letters but couldn't form when we would do spelling, he couldn't ever spell a word. If we were reading the word cat, it was like a new word to him every day. And I thought, how could this possibly be? I thought he just doesn't want to do this. He doesn't have enough motivation. So sharing these types of things with the Heave representative, I think there were some flags that came that it could just be a delayed, a desire. It could be a delayed desire to read, but I think it flagged in her some thoughts that it could be dyslexia and it was worth getting evaluated.
Sure. Okay, so you go and you see Dr. Verdilli.
Yes,
Tell us about that? What did he
right.
say to you?
So it's 2 days of evaluation, just setting expectations there. So And Dr. Verdilli, after compiling all of the tests that he did, found that Jacob was what he called word blind, which meant that every letter for Jacob was a new word every time he read it.
Hmm.
So he had zero ability to visually picture a word as a group that comes together to form a whole word. So he couldn't keep the letters in his mind, and I'll go into more about what that means later. But what that meant for me that day that my husband and I discovered that was we learned that Jacob wasn't simply being disobedient. He just needed to learn how he needed therapy to
Mhm.
learn how to learn. And it meant that he wasn't disobedient and I wasn't a bad teacher. And
Sure.
so I started crying, and I mean, it just that relief um, made me cry. And then the diagnosis itself, though, set on me very heavily. Like, okay, he's not a bad kid. I'm not a bad teacher, but oh my goodness, what are we dealing with now? So it
Right.
just took a whole, it was, we were in one place before we got the diagnosis, and then I'm in a new place, but at least this new place gave me a direction to go. It wasn't a hopeless place. It was
Sure.
we have a lot of work ahead of us, but a direction to go.
Sure. Yeah. So you've got a heavy diagnosis. You've got a whole new, um, just arena of
Yes,
homeschooling, of being a mom,
yes,
parenting that you now have to learn. You've still got three other
I
kids,
do. Yes, yes,
but what were some of the blessings that came out of getting that diagnosis for Jacob?
right.
What did you learn through that?
Well, the number one thing is, wow. Well, first of all, it made me very humbled. I had to humble myself before the Lord and
Mhm.
say, wow, you gave me this beautiful boy and help me to see him, like just really see who he is and love him for who he is and stop seeing him as an impediment to my homeschool. I had to really confess the sin of that. That was emotional for me too, because I had to release that to the Lord and then embrace this beautiful person that Jacob is and that what Dr. Verdilli's diagnosis showed was that Jacob is considered twice exceptional. And this is why he struggles. He has big emotions. Um, he's he is something else. But so twice exceptional means that he is very, very gifted in certain areas and has some he's very held back by certain learning challenges. And so when you see there's a chart that Dr. Verdilli gives, and everything in the middle dots are average. Jacob had like one or two dots in the average block, and everything else was either up here or down here. And that's called twice exceptional.
One of
And
the
so,
really,
what's that?
I'm just gonna, I wanted to interject. One of the really interesting things that I just observed with my own kids, with other people's kids over the years was for, you've got that you've got the challenges and then you've got the gifts that those kids have. But for the level of extremity, I should say, of the challenges, the gifts are that same
They are.
extreme,
Yes.
which
I
is,
had
I
no
mean,
idea.
it's heavy when the challenges are so heavy, but
Yeah.
it's really so neat and such a blessing to observe your kids with those super unique, awesome gifts.
Right. And so when I saw those, I was like, you know what? That's exactly right. He is so gifted at visual spatial skills. Like he tested as a 30-year-old with being able to manipulate images in his head, like 3D images and things
That's
like that.
awesome.
God
Mhm.
made my Jacob to be a builder and an engineer and a manipulator of information and visual information in his head. So I had to really embrace that this is the young man who will become the man that God wants him to be with these specific skills. And it's not my job to go around complaining that God didn't make Jacob a different way. So that
You
was
know,
easier for me to teach.
yeah, once I realized that, these challenges are, yes, they're challenges, but they also give us all these amazing gifts. Once
Yes.
that dawned on me, it gave me an appreciation of, oh, wow, I'm so thankful my kids aren't just
Yes.
average,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, because you had a couple of those average dots, but if
Yep.
they're all like, very close to that midline, they're it's going to be that the same way. So it just gave me an appreciation for not only the gifts that my kids had, but also for those challenges that go right along with them.
Right. So now I have a diagnosis that tells me what Jacob's strengths are. And so now that I had that, I was able to move that into my homeschool. And also, let me mention one other thing. Dr. Verdilli, I thought when he said, when I, my first thought after he said, your son is word blind, I thought he was going to say, and here's the school he needs to go to, or you need to put him in public school because you can't handle this. This is way too big. An expert needs to take this over. But Dr. Verdilli looked right at me and my husband and said, I am so glad you're homeschooling because that is the best place for your son. There is no curriculum, no school that will benefit your son as much as your home, what you can do for him at home. I was blown away by that, that he said that because, and I was hesitant to even go get an evaluation because I just pictured some doctor saying, you're not good enough to do this. And it was hard. So, just that relief in itself was really amazing.
Yeah, what a blessing. Okay, so how old is Jacob now
Okay, so now Jacob, he's got
at the
he's eight
time?
years old. Yep,
Yep.
he's 8 years old and he's got this, and so we're moving into the grammar stage.
Yes. Okay, so now you're in the grammar stage. He's in the grammar stage
Mhm.
of his life and his education, but you're also in the grammar stage.
I sure
In
am.
the grammar stage of
Yes,
learning about dyslexia. And as we all know, that's when you're trying to learn the nuts and bolts
correct.
and get all the terminology and all the definitions there. Um, can you, for those of us who aren't as experienced, can you share with us what is dyslexia? What does it mean?
Sure. So what I discovered is it is dyslexia is a neurobiological. It's a brain structure. It's brain imaging shows that people with dyslexia have difficulty with sound and letter mapping, fast word recognition, which means picturing a word in their head. Usually they have lower processing speeds, working memory problems, and all of these factors tend to be genetic. Most children with dyslexia have a parent or a close relative that also has reading difficulties. But the problem for me, so it turns out my brother is dyslexic, but
Mm,
they didn't really have that diagnosis back then. So it just really didn't occur to me that now I know my brother. After doing all this research, I was like, oh, this is my brother. And even I think my mom too. But so once you start learning this, you start looking around in your family and realizing, oh, this isn't my family. So this is true for me. So you will typically have somebody who has difficulty with reading. And the thing is they found that there's certain genes that influence how the brain language circuits form. And so, in summary, it's just a weaker auditory, visual, or language areas. It could be one or all three of these things, auditory, visual, or language areas. All of those all or one can be dyslexia. I think it's also really important to know what dyslexia is not. It is not caused by low intelligence. It is not caused by poor teaching. It is not caused by eyesight problems. However, I will say that one thing to consider if your child is having struggles with reading is visual tracking. I did my son Joshua, who's my youngest. He did have visual tracking problems, and so we were able to get that diagnosed and treated. And we could talk about that on another day. But he does struggle. He was also diagnosed with dyslexia, but not nearly as severely as Jacob's. And so when we got his visual tracking reset, he was able to read. He went from only being able to read for 5 minutes to being able to read for 20 minutes per setting
mm,
because his eyes were getting tired. So I guess what I'm saying is don't neglect the possibility that it could be visual tracking. That is another thing that needs checked. And lastly, it is not caused by a lack of motivation in your child.
Mhm.
I think if Jacob could have read, I think he wanted to please me. He just couldn't do what I was asking him to do, especially at those younger ages. He needed the tools, and it wasn't a disobedience or a lack of motivation. So, and another thing to keep in mind is dyslexia is a spectrum. There's many types of deficits, not just one. So you really, when you dive in to learn about dyslexia, you'll learn about many different types. And when you hone in on the ones or the many different types of deficits that affect your child, you can learn how to open up that blocked learning gate. So there's not just one form of dyslexia, is what I'm trying to say. So,
So this is a lot. There's a lot of details there. It sounds like
yes.
it's a complex um, learning processing
Yes, it is. Yeah,
issue,
truly. Yes,
challenge
truly.
for those kids, which, it certainly makes sense then that it can be very confusing for parents. So, speaking to parents who might be in those early stages, dealing with, confusion about what's going on with either with their child or in their homeschooling, the frustration that goes to that, what are some of the things that they could be looking for in their own child?
Sure. So when you see a high resistance for doing academic work after 7 years old, it could be a strong indication of a blocked learning gate. If they show strong oral comprehension skills but struggle with written language, that could be an issue. Jacob could talk your ear off, and his vocabulary was wonderful at 7, but he just really had trouble with reading. So difficulty learning math facts. That's not one that Jacob struggled with, but it is one over that does go often hand in hand with dyslexia. Also, low self-esteem when it comes to schoolwork or academic work, and a frustration related to schoolwork. A lot of kids, if you give them a worksheet and they just start scribbling on it and don't actually want to, they just aren't comprehending what's on the page around 7 years old. Those are just a few of the cues.
Well, and that really makes sense, that they're dealing with these struggles. They can't articulate these
That's
struggles. They
right.
don't even have like a different concept of what normal is. They
Right.
just know that they are not, for whatever reason, where their peers are. So yeah, that low self-esteem, I can imagine that's a very natural outcome for these kids who don't have a diagnosis.
Right. Yeah.
So just continuing on your conversation about Jacob's diagnosis, and your treatments that Dr. Verdilli recommended. What did that look like? What treatments? What kind of therapy? Tell us about that.
Sure. Sure. So, he recommended that we use a therapy with the National Institute for Learning Development, NILD, and it was I didn't. So he recommended a therapist, and it turns out that the therapist had cared for Jacob in the nursery when I was at MOPS, and so we already had a relationship with her, which was super wonderful. And Jacob, her name is Margie Watkins, and Jacob ended up seeing Margie from the time he was 8 till the time till really COVID hit, that we would have kept going with therapy with Margie. But we ended up ending
How
when
many years is that? From 8 to
so he
2021?
must have been, oh goodness, like I have trouble doing math in my head. It was a long time, up until, so that would have been ninth grade, eighth or ninth grade. He was still
Okay,
doing therapy with Margie.
gotcha.
And Margie is like an aunt to Jacob. They are such good friends. She is his biggest, besides me and his family. I mean, besides his family, Mrs. Watkins is his biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. Jacob is now at Liberty, and he needed to apply to the Office of Disability and Accommodations to get help with his tests. And Mrs. Watkins wrote that letter that got him a reader, a private room, double time for tests, all that. So, yeah,
So she's
so
continued to work with him all these years.
correct. And Liberty recognized her,
Mhm.
her expertise and her letter that she wrote for him. So I just want to say, if you're a parent and you aren't sure whether you should go get that diagnosis for your kid, that diagnosis may give them the tools they need to actually get through college one day, which
Yeah.
is has been our experience with Jacob, who I don't have time to go into the whole story right now, but never thought he would go to college. Boys at Liberty right now, studying welding and getting an associate's degree, which means he's got to put the time in for certain classes that are academically minded that he would never have thought he was going to take. And so, yeah.
That's neat. So what did some of those therapies look like?
Sure. Okay, so as part, so the therapies that Mrs. Watkins did are their brain. Like I mentioned before, that dyslexia is kind of a neurological brain pattern issue, and so NILD has created. They work with scientific studies to figure out how do we connect these brain synapses, this to help can make the connections in the brain to help the reading happen. So crossing the midline was a huge part of Jacob's dyslexia therapy. So the midline is an imaginary line down the center of the body, dividing it left and right halves. Crossing the midline refers to movements. So for example, where the hand and foot or eye move across this line, kind of like reaching your hand to touch your right hand to touch your left knee. And these movements encourage connection between the brain's hemisphere, right and left. And it helps because it focuses on strengthening those neurological connections, encouraging the both sides of the brain to work together, which in the brain scans you can see of dyslexic kids that that's just really not happening. But it needs to happen in order for reading, spelling, and writing to occur. So there was a lot of that crossing the midline therapy. It could look like throwing and catching a ball across the body, drawing. So there were a lot of figure eights. He would have to stand and do these big figure eights, writing on a vertical surface from left to right. Some other things that help with crossing the midline. This isn't therapy that Mrs. Watkins did, but dance, yoga, karate, other exercises that require crossing the arms and legs. Those are such great therapies for dyslexic
Yeah.
children. So the therapy also required just a lot of it's a lot of phonological processing for him. He had to really there were a lot of keywords that he would learn, sounds to connect sounds with the images, hours and hours of time doing that. And it was for the first 2 years, I would say it was very intense amount of time that we spent. But it I will say that the therapy is not a cure for dyslexia, but it strengthens the brain's ability to integrate information across those hemispheres. Um, so that's just, I could go on and on about the therapy. Could probably do
Yeah.
an hour-long session about that, but I'll stop there.
Sure, but integrating information from your right side to your left side, I mean, that's just crucial in processing information,
Sure.
um, which opens up a whole new world for your homeschooling. So
Correct.
tell us then, because your homeschooling has been pretty strained
Right.
previously, tell us how your homeschooling was impacted once you began therapy.
Okay. So I had to redo my expectations for Jacob specifically. We had so much time spent in therapy meant that we didn't have a lot of time really from the time he was 8 till the time he was 10 for many other academic subjects. We really did math and therapy and CC for those first 2 years. And I'll get into how we use CC in a minute. But I had to change the environment in our home, in my homeschool, because we had to spend so much time focusing on Jacob's weaknesses that I wanted to create a good amount of time after focusing on those weaknesses. I wanted him to have something to look forward to in the day. So we needed to create a good amount of time for him to focus on his strengths every day too. And so that he could have something to look forward to. And so that meant lots of time playing Legos, lots of time moving. Jacob has a lot of things he enjoys. And so I would just encourage parents, if you're struggling with this, don't spend your entire day focusing on your child's weaknesses. Let them have things to look forward to because the academics will come. And he needed those basic skills to get to the academics. That's for sure.
So I'm hearing therapy,
Yes.
math,
Yes.
and CC.
And CC.
What I'm
So
hearing.
yes.
So tell me, and we've talked about this before. Um, why CC? What was it about CC? Now
Yeah.
he's 8, he's in foundations
Right.
that really made it the perfect complement for your son with dyslexia and your homeschooling.
Yeah. So what's so fascinating is Jacob started obesitarians at 4 years old. And so this whole journey I've been talking about, CC has been part of it the whole time. But
Yeah.
after getting the diagnosis, one of the things that just opened my eyes was like, wow, CC is perfect for this child that God has given me because none of this foundations work requires him to read constantly. There's so much singing. So the memorization is all auditory, which is one of his twice exceptional skills is that I mentioned before is being able to process auto information that comes
Auditory
via that
information.
gate, via his ears. Yeah. So, and what I just put a bookmark there really quick. If you've got a kid with a learning struggle, you know how like a blind person can usually hear so much better because not always, but like if they're able to hear, like that hearing isn't, it's not blind and deaf, their hearing is usually so much more powerful because when there's a deficit, it creates a strength somewhere else. And that happens with Jacob because of his reading deficit I think that's part of why he gets information auditorily so well. So you got to look for the
Compensates in
strengths.
that way.
Yes, and that's huge in CC. Visual also with CC. CC is especially in foundations. So, when I realized that, I'd always loved CC. It wasn't that we were doing CC at home, but I realized around the time he was 8, we could harness CC's information to get that academic work in quickly that he wasn't getting other, uh, we could use it to get him the academic information and quickly in a quick way. We would do fun things at lunch and all sorts of things. And it didn't feel like hard academic work for him.
So what I love about this and what I'm hearing is his dyslexia diagnosis forced you to make CC Foundations program exactly what it was intended to be,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Getting the
Yes,
grammar of
yes,
all of the information across those 7 subjects,
yes.
reinforcing that memory work,
Yep,
which reinforced in his learning pathways
yep,
to prepare him for
yes.
next stages, for dialectic in the next stages.
And he really didn't miss because we had the strong history sentences. I really don't feel like he missed much because it was going in this way, even though in my head I had pictured kids sitting down reading books about history and all the things. But I don't feel like CC gave the tools that we really needed. And it was such a blessing, really a godsend once the Lord opened my eyes to see, listen, I gave this is here for you. This is a buffet for your son, really. So it was really,
That's
that was
awesome.
a blessing, huge blessing to realize we're already doing what Jacob needed.
Sure. Okay, so now here's where the conversation shifts, though, with a lot of families. This is where I always hear moms, usually of children, say, "So CC is great in foundations. It's great for those younger years, but it's not going to work for essentials or challenge for my child because of X, Y, or Z."
Mm. Yeah.
Talk to
Okay.
us about that. What was your experience specifically with essentials now for
Okay.
Jacob?
So, in fourth grade, Jacob was not ready for essentials.
Okay.
And that kind of made him sad because he wanted to be with his friends. But I also knew that he would be frustrated and he would be frustrated academically. So I asked him to wait. Um, and I said, let's give it one more year. But he was really excited to go into essentials. So that helps too, is that he had a motivation to want to be with his friends there. Oh goodness, I didn't bring that up either. The great thing about the foundations level too is he had a group of friends that he loved. He couldn't wait to go on Thursdays to CC. And he didn't feel, so that self-esteem thing that I'm talking about, he didn't feel that he was behind his peers. And the way CC works, he didn't feel like he was behind his peers. He wanted to be with them and he could participate. So that's a huge gift right there, is for him to not feel differently in the CC program. And I'm gonna talk about that, about essentials too. So by fifth grade, he had been doing therapy for a little while, and now he's able to read. He is no longer completely word blind. He is able to read and he is able to write. And so at this point, I had already done essentials with my older son, so I knew what we were getting into with essentials for him. And I was able to create an environment for essentials that worked for him with, so diagramming sentences. Now he can take the very basic parts of essentials and diagram sentences, which is very visual. And
Mm.
so actually our tutor, our essentials tutor, did we figure out what that was called? The big chart.
The
The
big poster.
she made a big poster of, where they write the sentence out and they label the sentence and then diagram it. But I could put it on, we put it up on the wall. And so he was able to stand, and that was kind of a crossing the midline
Mm.
activity too, which helped him to access. So he was able to access the information better because he wasn't just sitting at a little desk with a tiny little piece of paper doing these sentences. So it's just something to consider, that kinesthetic, instead of having your essentials student sitting at a small desk for a long time. Um, Standing up and doing these things on a board that was perfect for him. It really helped Jacob to learn how to organize words, and he really needed that. It was a skill he really needed to be able to recognize the subject and the verb, and what are nouns and what are verbs and what are adjectives. So I think it paired very well with his therapy too. That he was doing. So, also, I would accommodate. I would, instead of mastering, I think there's 4 or 5 sentences that Essentials gives you to master in the week. We would do the easy plus one. We would maybe work on 2 sentences. If he was getting bored with the sentences, I would create other sentences. There were some tools that I found online that gave some other options for essential sentences.
Give me
Uh,
an example of that, Marie, if you don't mind.
like what type of
So
sentences?
yeah, so you've got, let's say, we're in the SVTDO sentence pattern, and what are some of those SVTDO sentences from Essentials? Um,
Oh, it's been so long, Amy.
I mean, the only one that's coming to my head
But
is Jesus Wept for SVI.
yeah, well, some of them were just funny about animals.
Okay,
Like they were just or some I found one that used some of the history sentences from Foundations, or like
so
pulled
you're
in.
using. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
but
Well, I was going to say, so you're following the same pattern
right.
that is in the essentials guide for that week's
Yes.
homework, and you're
Yes.
just substituting the subject, a different word for the subject, a different
Right.
word for the verb, a different word for the direct object, so that
Correct.
it's a little more amusing and like
Right.
palatable for your.
Right. But sometimes, the essentials guide would move through and move to a compound complex sentence, and that would be too much for him. And so I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't require him to master everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um,
Okay.
go ahead.
So then that's the essentials of the English language side for essentials. But then there's the other component of IEW for essentials, which, for a parent of a young dyslexic student, with the reading and now paragraph writing, that could seem really daunting.
Yeah. It ended up being the perfect pair for my Jacob, because he enjoyed the stories that they were small there, and the font was really great for him in the IEW stories. Like it didn't require him to do a lot of reading. And so we would sit together on the couch, or I would either read it to him if I thought that he needed that, or he would read it to me. It just really depended on the week or the day. But so we would schedule it for, how do I say it? I didn't want him, I didn't want to spend all of his working memory all at once.
Okay.
So it looked a little different than what my other students and my family could accomplish. So I'm just saying breaking it down into bite-sized chunks was important for Jacob. So let's see. So the keyword outlines. So we would read, and I would sometimes, so if I'm reading, I'm asking him to, find what is the subject and then write a keyword for that. And what is the verb and write a keyword for that. And so we're breaking it down into small pictures, which is not held up by his inability to write words. Does that make sense? The keyword outline is perfect for him because he actually really likes to draw.
So he
Sometimes,
would draw the pictures of the subject of the verb
yes,
rather than
yes,
write the words,
correct.
and
Yeah.
that was engaging and fun for him.
Yeah, it was like he would, and, he didn't always want to do it, but it wasn't onerous. I'll just put it
Sure.
that way. Yeah, it wasn't like I was asking him to do something that was outside of his ability. It was definitely within his ability to do that. And he loved having the ability to create funny stories from his keyword outline. So we engaged relationally over that too. I didn't get a lot of pushback from him about these IEW paragraphs that he was learning to write. So also a highlight of the week was when he got to read his essays to his dad.
Okay.
So that was fun. So typically we would take the keyword outline that he finished. He would read to me or he would repeat back to me, and I would type it into the computer for him. Then that
Okay.
would get printed. He would read it to his dad to get prepared to maybe get called on to read it in class on Thursday. But he was always ready to read because he had prepared ahead of time.
He'd practice the reading so
Yeah.
that he could go in and
Yeah.
do it smoothly.
Yeah.
Were there any other accommodations that you made with IEW as far as putting together the keyword outline? Or I know you scribed for him
Correct.
from keyword outline to essay. Was there anything else that you did there to simplify things for
Sure,
him?
yeah. We used a color code. So I would give him colored pencils, especially if we needed to speed things up.
Mm,
So I remember nouns were a certain color and verbs were a certain color and adjectives were a certain color. And then I would say, put this in your, like, take those colored words and put them in your own words. So if the keyword outline was just getting too long to make,
sure,
then we
sure.
just ran out of time for the week. So those colors really, really helped him, and it helped train him for finding the subject noun and the verb and the adjective.
Yeah, so it just reinforced the EL side of things.
Correct.
And
Yeah, absolutely. And that was not, I don't remember, that was a happy time in our
Mhm.
homeschool. It was not doing essentials in IEW, paring it back, making it be what he could handle. I didn't mention this before, but I'm just going to mention it now. Every student, and every human has a funnel for what their
Mhm.
brain can take. And just like a funnel, if you're pouring oil or something and it overflows, our brain that happens to our brains. We get to a point where there's only just so much that we can absorb, and then everything else, it doesn't really matter for our student. If you see that your student's brain, their funnel is full, it's just time to be done. Like let them go and let everything settle down a little bit and come back. And try not to force feed that information in because it's just not going to go in if they've reached their limit.
It's not
So,
going to be productive time
correct.
for
Yes,
anybody, and then it's going to be stressful. And
correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
so essentials, we have this huge project at the end of at second semester that we all look forward to, Faces of History,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
super exciting. But that's a lot of reading.
Yep.
And it's typically a much longer paper. What
Right.
can that look like for a dyslexic student
Yeah.
who's like Jacob?
Yeah. So Jacob loved Faces of History. It was the highlight of his academic year, and he just couldn't wait to pick a character. And what happened, so how we worked with that was we worked with the tutor to let him pick a character sooner than some of the other kids because we started working on it. We would check out books from the library typically in December, right after foundations. So, when we went on break, we would just start getting books for him to look at. And uh, just compile some information, get to the grammar stage of the character that he picked. And so he let's see. And we would read together and almost like make some keyword outlines of the books that he was reading. And I would help him. I would help him compile that information, learn how to organize it. And by the time we would get to March or April, we were ready. I just made it much smaller chunks. That's all. I think that's very important just to plan ahead, to know that this is not going to be something that you're just going to need more time than a
Sure.
neurotypical child. So,
So you went through the same process. He
yeah,
still did
yeah.
the reading. He still put together keyword outline and into paper. You just started earlier.
Correct. And
And
I
you
would
guys
spend more
participate.
time with him typically than other students. My oldest son did most of the research himself, and I would help him, hey, we could organize it this way, or is that the best place to put that? Or that's irrelevant information, really. Maybe that should get pulled. But I just worked closer with Jacob. And I also modeled writing skills for him too. And I think that's important to remember is that you are a model for how to write, and that's okay. It's important for them to see that. And I would say by the second year in Essentials, I want to point out he started to type his own papers. So we switched seats.
Mhm.
And so he was sitting at the computer at the keyboard, and I would sit next to him. And so we were still working together, but the driver seat changed, and I
Wow.
became co-pilot, and he was pilot for his paper. And
Yeah.
so then that's what you want to see is independence moving forward.
Mhm. Yeah. So what were the benefits of essentials for Jacob?
So it gave him confidence that last year, when he started typing his own papers, that moved him to having confidence that he could do this on his own, helped him to learn how to organize words into paragraphs. Like the word kid was word blind. He didn't even, I mean, this gave us the skills, it gave us the opportunity to use the skills he was learning in therapy to put them together in this program. And he did it in a very loving environment with other students who he was friends with. The tutors were so supportive of Jacob and very respectful of understanding that he learns a little differently too. And I'm just so grateful for our wonderful essentials tutors that we had at Centerville. They really poured into Jacob and worked with me with the accommodations of going a little slower than the other students. But listen, you can't fail at essentials. You just keep trying. That's the best thing about the program is there's not a teacher giving a big A or F in a red pen on top of the page. Your child cannot fail. You just keep going.
Right. And so, one of the things I just want to stop and make a point out of here, whether the child is dyslexic, whether the child is, oh goodness, ADHD or what, or gifted, it doesn't matter. It really comes down to the skills
Yes.
that we're training, that they're honing,
Yep.
that are going to benefit them for life.
That's
So,
true.
really, as parents, we often get into this mindset of, we're checking boxes and we're thinking subject knowledge because that's how school was for us
Right.
back in the days. It's about subject knowledge and you take this test and you show that you have the knowledge of the subject. but what we're providing through classical education, through CC, it's so much different. It's so much bigger than that. We're providing a framework for them
That's true.
to
Yeah.
practice skills. And
Yeah.
so
And
for Jacob and for my Jacob, for any other child, they're they're acquiring knowledge through
yeah,
their memorization. But now here in Essentials, they're processing that information. They're processing the structure of sentences, but they're also processing the information that they read in a source text, and they're learning how to organize
that's right.
information
Yes. And
in a
let
way
me,
that go ahead.
I was just going to say, let me throw something in there just to
Yeah,
piggyback on what you're saying. It's skills at their own pace. So in a
right.
typical classroom, they're required to keep up with all the other kids in kind of this um, robot type way. Everybody's got to be in the same basic, same average level. But
Mhm.
that's just not the way life is. That's not the way we are as humans. And so I feel like CC and Essentials are more in tune with who we are, or who our little people are as human beings, and
Yeah.
kind and hospitable learners. Or is it is they create an environment of hospitality for learners who need that space, that kind and more gentler space to be who they are.
Mhm. Yeah, which really should just be extended to every single kid and every single learner, whether
Yes.
they have challenges or not. But again, just focusing, and I really want the parents here to um, see that it's the bigger picture, the skills that are being developed.
Yep.
Uh, by our kids. So we've gone through foundations, we've gone through essentials, but now it's getting even bigger. Challenge
Yeah.
A, and and even for a neurotypical parent of a neurotypical child, challenge A can seem overwhelming. It can seem daunting. So much information. What did that look like for Jacob specifically, and how did you manage Taylor,
Yeah.
just create his challenge A year so that he could be successful?
Yeah. So looking at the Challenge A curriculum, oh, and his older brother had already done it, so I knew it. I knew that what we were getting into again. So Challenge A ended up being an amazing year for Jacob. Um, he was with a friend group that he liked, and so the academics did still require me that it required my time. I still had to budget a lot of time to be with him to make sure that he was successful. But I had previously learned that I needed to love this time with my son. He needed to know that this was how I was just going to be there for him. I was a support system to him. And we had already developed a structured time where he expected that we would work together. So it wasn't strange to him that we were going to be spending time. But at this point, he's got some independent research skills because he's learned this from Essentials too. So with the animals that they have to research and write about, he actually loved that. Thought it was so funny to pick different types of animals. He would go to the library and pick out books about animals, and he used those IEW skills. I wouldn't have him write a ton, but he was writing on his own because it was a topic he was interested in.
So that's
Audible.
the research strand that
Yes, let
you're
me
talking about,
yes.
where
Yes.
they are picking a creature of their choosing. They're doing the research. It's a
Mhm.
um, natural sciences research,
Yes.
and
And
they're reading and exploring, and then putting together a an essay to
it's like
present.
a journal. Yeah, yeah. And he got to draw pictures of the animal. And this boy, he's gifted with drawing. So he really enjoyed drawing the silly animals himself, and labeling the parts and things like that. He would never spell the parts right if he wasn't looking at the book, but that was okay. So, and I also had him do bibliographies. I'm telling you, Amy, the word bibliography. has 100 different spellings. Did you know that?
Imagine.
But that's okay.
Absolutely. He know, I mean, the fact that he is in challenge A, even realizing that that's part of a research report.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I always thought that
Good
was
for
so
him.
funny. And we would
Yeah.
laugh together at the different ways. Oh, yeah, that's not it. Okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
So it's really important to have a sense of humor too. So I'll throw
Yes.
that in as well.
Amen to that.
So, okay, so that's research. So exposition, he had, there's a lot of books to read, but Audible, a long time. I mean, we had at this point though, I really we'd been doing checking out books from the library, but at this point, I think I joined Audible. I got a subscription to Audible because it just simplified things for our homeschool. And I also purchased technology for him to listen to Audible books on. Um, so also. Well, and of course, when you add technology to a 13-year-old boy or give it to a 12-year-old boy, that complicates things. So I won't go into all of that, but you just have to be, I don't know.
Vigilant.
Yeah, we ended up having to make rules about that. So anyway, so he listened to all his books while he was playing Legos or working with his hands. So that was a rest strand for him, listening to those books. And he loved the stories, most of them. So I didn't get a lot of pushback there for that. And so we're going to move into Lost Tools of Writing that pairs with these books. That is actually a great curriculum for dyslexic students because, well, at first it really pairs everything back. It's really a thinking program.
Yes.
LTW is how to think about what you're reading, and so it's creates wonderful logical ideas. And he wasn't told what he had to write. He's a very intelligent young man, and so he would often come up with amazing whether or not statements and pick affirmatives or negatives with those Annie charts. And Annie charts are rather small. They're not, I mean, small writing. It doesn't require writing huge amounts of sentences. So he was very quickly, I'd say by second semester of challenge A, he was able to do Annie charts on his own independently. I had to model for him how to do it, but he got the hang of it pretty quickly. So he was able to learn how to make thesis statements, which I would always make sure that they were um, things he could write about quickly. Sometimes these kids will pick thesis statements that are very difficult to write whole papers on. So I would help him evaluate that. But also, still in Challenge A, for the most part, he doesn't feel like he's separate, like a different type of student, a different learner. So he doesn't have major self-esteem problems with being dyslexic in this Challenge A class either. So uh, the one spot that was we had to pull back in Latin because we only had so much time in a day, and
Mhm.
only like that funnel I was talking about, we couldn't do the Latin strand at the same level. And that was okay, but that's where we had to make a big accommodation, heavily tailored that, mostly just memorized vocabulary for the Latin strand.
So here's where I just want to just jump in and insert a plug. Um, in CC, we always want to reinforce that the parent is the teacher. There's a partnership there, but ultimately that parent has the responsibility to set those expectations. And in challenge, I would really encourage parents, especially parents of, dyslexic students or, those with challenges to view what's in the guide as a buffet. It is never intended to be a checklist. It is never intended to be, you're not there to serve the guide and to be mastered by the guide. You're there to let the guide serve you in your homeschooling. So
Yes,
looking at it as a buffet and what can we reasonably do? And what are the things that are going to be a benefit to my child? The intent in tailoring is to tailor what CC has offered, so that your child can be successful in the work that they do. And it may look different from one student to the other, and that's awesome. God didn't make all of our kids the same. So
that's right.
I just want to encourage. that concept of not feeling like you have to do everything. It is not meant to be a checklist. Consider it a buffet. You're not going to gorge on everything in a buffet and eat all the things, but you might sample a little bit here and a little bit there.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Science fair. And I can't I'm going to talk about that because he loved science fair. And I can't remember if it was in A or B back when he was doing it. It used to be in B.
It would have been in A
It would
still.
have been in A.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so but regardless, he loved science fair. But that required a heavy lift on my part to help him with the research and all of that. But that was a huge buy-in for him because he had so many
He was
creative
invested
ideas.
in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Good. Okay. So B, let's just chat real quickly. What did you do? How did B look for Jacob? What did you tweak? What did you tailor?
Yes. Okay. I want to mention, I'm going to go back to LTW really quick. Of course, we're doing LTW first semester in Challenge B, piggybacking on Challenge A. One thing about the structure of LTW is that it has a 3 week what is that called?
Rotation.
3 week rotation. That's the word I'm looking for. So that is a great pace for a dyslexic student. You've got what is that called? Arrangement for the
Invention.
invention, arrangement, and then elocution.
Right.
So those are uh, it's not you're not writing an entire paper in 1 week. And that was it was such a great structure for Jacob to learn how to write, how to think first. We want this. We want students to think well because writing turns out so much better when they're thinking better thoughts about things. So, I like that it slowed down. It's not such a fast way. It doesn't expect students to write a paper every week.
Yeah.
The outlines taught him how to structure a paper. It gave a great foundation for him to learn how to do that. Um, it's I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. But he also loved, so Challenge B, he loved mock trial. Even though that was really hard for him, um, he was very invested in it because he's really competitive. But I had tears in my eyes when he was done with that because my dyslexic kid stood there in a courtroom and said to the judge, he said, I'm dyslexic, but I'm going to do this anyway, or so whatever he said. It was actually really funny, but he did tell the judge before he went on with his opening statement that he was going to try really hard to read all or to get all the words right.
That's awesome. He just threw
Yes.
it right out there up
He
front.
just threw it right out
That's
there.
the
He's like, I'm
expectation.
trying.
Yeah. Good for
So,
him. That's
but I
fun.
was so proud of him because it was a daunting task to be able to keep all of that information in his head, and he wanted to do it, and he did do it. He did a really good job. And seeing him in the suit and all that, it was great. It was a wonderful experience. So even I know parents of dyslexic students look at mock trial and say that is daunting. I'm not sure my son or daughter can do that, but working with the director was amazing. You do what the child, how do I say this? Um, we expected a certain amount of work from him. He did it, and he surprised us with even more because he cared to do well for his team. And so it's when you give the kids, when the kids have buy-in, they often can do more than you expect.
Right.
And
Well, and so I'm just reminded of what you and I talked about in some of our previous conversations regarding Jacob, that, he's still continuing therapy during this time.
yes,
And that therapy is really honing in on his weaknesses
yes.
so that you, through CC, could really hone in on his strengths.
That's right. And the directors of the challenge programs, they were so awesome with working with his strengths. In fact, one said to me, Marie, your son's audio skills, the ability to hear the story, she's like, he gets these stories way more than the kids who are reading them with their eyes. Like he really understands the characters, he understands the plot. And she goes, I can always count on him to be to help lead the discussion in the classroom because he understands the stories or to keep the discussions going. And that was so awesome when I got that feedback from one of his directors.
Sure. That's great. Okay, so before we get into the next levels of challenge, upper levels 1 through 4, let's just pause. What advice would you give to now that challenge parent who's looking ahead at high school
Mhm.
to consider whether challenge is a good fit for their own dyslexic child?
Right. Okay. So I have um, previously talked about how I had spent a lot of time sitting next to Jacob and doing a lot of school with him. And I know that can feel overwhelming for a parent to kind of grasp the thought of spending so much time working with a student who's 13 or 14 years old. But at this point, what I saw for Jacob was that A and B had given him more skills to work independently. And so moving into challenge one, um, he had the ability to work on his own, and I needed to, but he also doesn't work fast.
Okay.
So that means that moving into challenge one, we're going to need to set expectations that are reasonable for him. But I wanted to give him the ability to work independently on subjects. Um, so the upper level challenges provide dyslexic students with amazing abilities to excel, especially in presentations, which I didn't bring that up, but from foundations, I mean, everyone who's done CC knows that one of the strengths of the program is helping students learn how to present, do public speaking. And at this point, Jacob has become a really excellent public speaker. And the upper level challenge programs are just going to help him become an even better public speaker. So,
And so let me just get coming back to like classical education and getting our classical terminology in there to reinforce that. That's the rhetorical stage. That's the five
yes,
canons of rhetoric:
yes.
invention, arrangement, elocution,
Mhm.
memory, delivery. You talked about invention, arrangement, elocution when you were talking about LTW, the Lost Tools of Writing. And our kids are doing that every time that they're taking in information and they're processing that information to gain understanding. That's your invention.
That's
Putting
right.
it into a logical order. An
Yes.
outline, that's your arrangement, putting those words on it, attaching the stylistic devices, making it their own voice, for whatever audience is in front of them, that's your elocution, committing ideas to memory, making
Yes.
this memorable for whatever presentation they're doing. Like they all want to make it memorable. They want to have it be funny or whatever it is. There's your memory, and then finally that presentation itself, the outcome, that
Yeah.
delivery.
Yeah. I love the opportunities.
Five
So
years
many
of rhetoric.
opportunities.
Mhm.
Yes. And
Again, the skills that they're developing, that carries with them throughout their life.
right.
That's not just, their education for middle school, high school, whatever. Those are life skills that they're developing.
And let me just put a plug in for how the Socratic method is so good for dyslexic students because, as I've mentioned before, dyslexia doesn't mean your student is has intelligence problems. My son is so intelligent and articulate, and the Socratic method allowed him to use words, verbal words, instead of written words to share that. Like it gave
Mhm.
him an opportunity to voice, um, just share his ideas with the things he was reading, with
Have a
the
voice.
what's that?
To have a
Yeah,
voice.
to have a voice, exactly. And get to know his classmates and the relationships developed with the directors, things like that. Like the Socratic method that is applied in the challenge levels, upper challenge levels, is a really beautiful way for dyslexic students to participate in their education and have buy-in, make them want to learn because they know they're going to be called on to share and be part of the discussion.
Sure. Yeah. So, you had talked about, at the beginning of each challenge level, you analyzed what was in the guide, what was
That's
in our
true.
curriculum, and then you did what with that?
Okay, so every challenge level has a different emphasis. So I would make a plan of where I could know Jacob would excel on his own, and when I needed to spend where I needed to spend the time with him. Because remember, I still have littleish people at home that I also need to spend time with too. So, and he needed to soar on his own. So there were certain things that I needed to. So for instance, in challenge one, I knew debate would be a something that he wouldn't be able to excel on his own. So I knew when we got to debate, I would need to invest time there with him. Um, but physical science had an audiobook, and so I wouldn't spend time reading it to him. I bought him the audiobook so he could do that on his own. I would have to work with him, I knew, on lab reports for him to learn how to do it. But once I worked on several with him, he learned the skills to do it pretty much on his own, and I would edit just like any other parent should do. Challenge is not a checkout program for any parent at all. Like we are the teachers at home still. And so I was still with Jacob, probably working with him more than parents of neurotypical students, but that's okay. I was so happy for him to have these opportunities to work, um, to do debate, and I wanted him to be confident in that, and that meant me spending more time with him there. Oh, okay. With reasoning, so for logic, I would give him the answer key so he could work backwards with the
Okay.
answers.
And so that's, we're talking about challenge one course material.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Challenge one, I think probably challenge two, both had the Memoria Press,
They did. Yep.
where I could give him the answer key to work backwards with that.
And now that's a really interesting concept, giving them the answer keys and having them work backwards. To a lot of parents in our traditional schooling mindset, that's going to seem like cheating.
No.
But what skills is that reinforcing for your child?
Right. Well, I mean, it's the ability to do deductive reasoning. You know, if he's able to see, hey, this is if he's able to pull it apart, you know,
Sure.
kind of go backwards to see, oh, going both directions, it just helped him to be, he actually really liked logic. And I'm not sure he ended up having to use the answer key always that way. But if he were struggling, I would say, just go to the answer key and figure out why it's set up that way. And it gave him the grammar skills and the dialectic skills to engage with grammar or the grammar of logic. Because of course they're just, they got it in challenge B, but then working, it's not a huge, it's not a difficult strand in challenge one. I don't think he liked it.
It's a
So
strand of rest, definitely.
yeah,
But I just really appreciate that that was one of the ways that you tailored for
yeah,
Jacob. And I think that that is just an awesome way um, to make some of those strands more restful and
yeah.
hospitable.
We also did that with math too. We would work backwards. I would tell him to work backwards from the answer key if he was really struggling.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, and there's lots of projects at the end of
Yes.
one. That can be overwhelming to any parent.
Right.
How was that for you and Jacob?
Are you talking about the Shakespeare and the Econ
Shakespeare,
project?
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, he loved those. He loves projects. He loves working with his hands. His Shakespeare project was hysterical. I think he did um, the Shakespeare insults and made a card game of war, which insult, like he rated the insults with different powers. And anyway,
Oh,
so he had
that's
a lot of
awesome.
fun with that.
So he actually had to read Shakespeare in order to come up.
Well, I don't know. I think we probably Googled Shakespeare insults.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, so it wasn't like he was compiling them from reading Shakespeare, but I think that's how he did it, was he downloaded some Shakespeare insults and then made a card game out of it.
But he
Um,
still went from a word blind kid
yes.
diagnosed at 8 to he has just grown in
Oh, yeah.
all of these ways and in all of these skills through his CC work.
Right.
That's really
Exactly. And built friendships, and I do feel that he felt loved and part of a community, which which is wonderful. I'm going to go talk about the econ project because that built his relationship with his father. Because, my husband was working on, I mean, he understands the stock market a lot better than I do. And so Jacob was very invested in that project and he got to work on it with his dad. And he kept begging for real money, which he didn't actually get.
He didn't get the 10,000 at the end.
No, he didn't even want 10,000. He was like, "Can I have 100 or more?" And anyway, I don't think they ended up investing, but I think that would have been great if they did. But they worked together on that $10,000 stock pretend stock market project, and he was very competitive with that with his classmates. I remember that for sure. So,
Exactly.
but that was a good memory from that challenge
One
one
of
year.
the other strands in challenge one that can be a little bit daunting for kids and parents alike is in debate, and not specifically the formal team policy debate, but in reading those original government
Oh,
documents,
yes, yes, yes. Okay, that's
annotating those and summarizing. That to me, I mean, I know how it was for my own neurotypical sons that
mhm,
went through one. What about the dyslexic child? Those
right.
those are meaty things to get through.
Sure. That was a strand we did together.
Okay.
Although I didn't do it every week together because um, for a lot of those, I was able to find something on YouTube or, if it was a speech, somebody had recorded it. I was able to send that to him. Um, there's a lot of things he could listen to and
So he's
provide.
able to listen to those original, the
Yes.
Declaration of Independence,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
Military
Oh,
Compromise, all
that's
of those things that they
Yeah.
read.
Yes. I mean, depending on what I was able to find, and I would compile, I would say, okay, so I forgot to mention this. I would create, so from challenge A, for every challenge level, every week I created an assignment sheet for him that
Okay.
I would send to him into his Gmail account, and it would have some of it, so he could click on links if I needed to give him a video to watch, because he gets information that way. So sometimes I would find stuff, whatever science level we were at, I would give him something to watch that was about the topic, so he
That's
could
neat.
absorb it that way. I did spend a lot of time researching, hey, what online material and it wouldn't be, I would try to make it not super long, like it wouldn't be an hour long. I would try to find 10 or 15-minute or smaller clips for him to watch, maybe about whatever if we were doing the Dred Scott decision. So he could watch a video. What is the Dred Scott decision? So it'd be a
Right.
snippet before.
To give a little bit more context, better
Correct.
context of the concept before working through the
Right.
document. And then when it came to annotation, what did that look like?
Yeah. So let's see. I'm trying to think. I mean, we would sit together. We would sit together and do it. And I think I had him write. I bought it was his book, so he would write in the book, or I would highlight together.
Right.
But yeah, it was definitely a together project, especially the Constitution. We were
Yeah.
doing that for sure. But he
And I
definitely
think for
got it.
most kids in ninth grade in challenge one, that it's great that that is a together strand
I would
between.
encourage any parent, whether they have a dyslexic student or not, to do that with their student because it is a great relationship builder to talk about these things. And I remember reading Roger Taney's I think it was the Dred Scott decision. It was Fugitive Slave Act or something, one of those, and just being disgusted with
Mhm.
the the Supreme Court ruling,
Sure.
and just outraged about the injustice and being able to
Right.
talk about that together. Can you believe a Supreme Court justice would find this in the Constitution? Horrible.
And
So,
through that conversation between you and Jacob, then you're wrestling
yes,
that information together, and that also helps him gain understanding
right.
those with that subject knowledge.
Yeah.
But back to the annotation and the summary, though, I don't know of very many ninth grade students, Challenge One students, who can sit down with the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution and just figure out how to annotate that on their
Right.
own.
No, I
That is
think I did it.
something that,
I worked with all my kids in Challenge One
yeah,
on that strand, honestly.
definitely. I think that's something that I strongly encourage all of the parents. Okay, let's kind of buzz on through here though to upper level. Um,
Yeah,
we're now in challenge two. You had mentioned to me that this is now Jacob's junior year, actually, because of previous decisions there, and it's also COVID. Um, talk to me about what challenge two looks like and how you're able to focus on Jacob's strengths in challenge
sure.
two.
So let's see. So Challenge Two's debate strand has those art comparison papers.
Mhm.
Wow, did he impress me with that strand? Unbelievable. I had this book called it's like an art book, very thick, and it's like art through the ages.
Okay.
And so I gave that to him and I would just say pick something to compare with. And every time he would pick something that I was like, wow, how did you find that comparison there? But it would be so pithy and beautiful. And so he's just so visually gifted. And so that was a huge blessing. That strand was wonderful. And also those art comparison papers aren't particularly long. They're not meant to be humongous research papers. So it's just, so I gave him a very basic format to work with. And at this point, he could do that fairly independently. And so that was huge. We had to tailor the Lincoln Douglas debate. He didn't end up actually debating with Lincoln Douglas. He was very nervous about doing it it's a one-on-one debate. And so at this stage, I think I can't remember. There was a lot going on. I think he had joined some sports at this point, so there were other things. So we tailored it, and I think the director just had him be a judge.
Which,
For the
let me just jump in on that. I think that that is a fantastic way to process Lincoln Douglas debates. You don't have to be, I mean, being involved in Lincoln Douglas debates is it is a priceless opportunity for these kids, but there's so much that they can learn by observing and being ready to provide feedback. So they're actively listening so that they can provide feedback to the debaters. I think that's a fantastic opportunity and a great way to scale that strand if you need to with your child.
Yeah, and some other ways that we scaled. So, when you're doing Lost Tools of Writing, the student gets to pick the prompt. So
Mhm.
now in Challenge 2, the guide gives a prompt. And sometimes the prompts didn't really fit Jacob's thought process. And so I would just say we would brainstorm a different prompt and I would just email the director and say, Jacob would like to write about this. And it wasn't super off or anything. It was just his brain worked better with thinking of it in a different way. The prompt he did do really well with was what is a hero? He really enjoyed writing those
That's that
papers.
first exposition paper in
Yeah,
chapter.
I think the first two, one, it's like Beowulf is what is a hero, and I think
Sir
the
Gawain and
Canterbury Tales. Yeah,
Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and
yeah,
Canterbury Tales. They're
yeah,
reading those three.
yeah.
Three different characters in
Correct.
those books, and
Yeah,
then analyzing, again, coming back to, those dialectic skills in the five common topics of really analyzing the characters. Who are they? Comparing them,
yeah,
considering their circumstance, considering relationships and, the cause and the effect of things and their testimony, um, to come up with a final answer from the student's perspective.
right. And they're supposed to pull quotes from the books
Yeah.
to, support their point, whatever they're making. And I just remember being really impressed with his ability to do that with that prompt. And then we go to The Hobbit later on in the second semester, and I think it pulls that prompt back in. And I just remember really liking whatever he did. It's been so long, I can't remember exactly, but I remember being really impressed with that. So, that was really good. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's Credo and Meno. So getting into those reasoning strands. That's not even meant to be done at home necessarily with the parents, but I wanted him to be able to engage in class about Credo and Meno. And so I read them on my own and ended up talk, trying to schedule at least one day a week to talk to him about Credo and Meno. And I actually learned a lot personally from that. Um, let's see.
And we've
And
got biology in the research strand.
oh, yes.
He's gone through physical science and now he's in biology. This is Apologia. And
Yes.
these are big textbooks too. It's a lot of reading for each module.
Right.
Are you still, what are you doing there?
Yeah, so audio, he was doing we still were doing the audio version and he's doing the experiments in class. I'm having him still do the science experiments. I got Apologia offered multiple choice tests that are different from anyway,
They do.
I got the different set of tests for him and I would just read them to him. I would sit there he didn't take tests on his own. I was a reader for him.
That's
And
great.
then whatever mistakes he made, I would ask him to find the answer. So there was mastery there.
Sure. Great. So challenge to experience overall.
Challenge two. Okay. So there were a lot of positives. The art project that was he did a really good job with that. He had a creative idea with that. He struggled a little bit with classmates. At this point, it's COVID year, and some people had it was a bigger class. People had joined from other campuses that didn't really know Jacob. And I think he struggled with that, honestly, Amy, because Jacob has a very big personality. And
Mm.
if people know him, they know his heart and where he's going. And I think he struggled especially with some of the girls in the class who thought that he was obnoxious, I'm sure. And he's also a 16-year-old boy, so he did
Dynamics
struggle.
of a high school class,
Yeah,
right?
I won't say everything was perfect for that year during class because it was hard for him. He would come home being very frustrated
Mm.
with some of the interactions that happened during class. But that's not the challenge curriculum's problem. It's sometimes that happens. You've got a dynamic in a class that doesn't always mesh. It just wasn't what he was used to because there were a whole bunch of new students.
Yeah.
So,
But now he's going into a senior year.
yes,
You mentioned that his schedule didn't line up with the community schedule. So what did
right.
you do
Okay.
CC wise?
Yeah. I'll just mention Jacob got the opportunity to do an aviation maintenance course. And so that took up time and he just couldn't go to CC. So what we did was I just combined challenge three and challenge four. I looked at the guide and said, what would be great for Jacob? And so we did some the Odyssey and the Iliad at home. And we did the philosophy from challenge three at home trying to think there were probably some other things we did at home but and also he was struggling at that point like I mentioned he was struggling with the community too
Okay.
so but it was good we still had the challenge relation to the program itself and the classical skills that we're building into the rhetoric stage they were great and I'm so glad that we were able
Right.
to finish up strongly at home using
Sure.
the different tools that classical conversations gave us.
So let's take a few minutes and just wrap up. What's some final advice that you would offer to students with dyslexia, as
Mhm.
well as their tutors and directors, and then finally to parents?
Sure.
Starting with students, what would you advise students, or how would you advise students?
Okay. I think it's very important to know that God loves you and made you just the way He wanted you to be, and that there's no reason to hide who you are, and that you're not a mistake, and that um, it's very important um, uh, to just be open about that, who you are. Like if you're, we all have strengths and weaknesses, every single one of us, and some weaknesses are just more noticeable in the academic areas than others. So I would say learn to advocate for yourself, not to offer excuses, but to inform people about your needs, your academic needs. And parents need to encourage children who struggle to learn how to advocate for themselves. And that doesn't mean don't tell anybody that you have
Mhm.
struggles. Just
Yeah.
pretend you don't. Act normal like everyone else.
Mm.
That's really not going to lead to successful in any part of your child's life to hide who they are.
Yeah.
Um,
Great. What about to the tutors and the directors? What's your advice there?
Okay. So these students often need more processing time.
Mm,
And so when you're playing games that require very fast recall, that's going to cause these kids to feel very different and have self-esteem problems. So just be aware of that. Sometimes that's fine. It just depends. It depends on what these fast games are that you're doing. But if you're seeing a kid shut down or be upset about these games, or have a bad attitude, it might be because they have a blocked learning gate. And so I would be careful with some of those review games that require fast recall or not, or just do a mashup. Don't do that as your only review game.
sure. Yeah.
So just being aware that some of these kids require extra processing time. If you ask them a question, give them a prompt to help, answer things like that. If you're asking them to read something, um, that would probably be more an essentials or challenge. Try to prepare them ahead of time. Hey, I'd like to ask you to read this and give them so they can have a prep time to read it
That's
ahead of
really
time.
good.
I would say create an environment for open communication and trust with the parents of children who learn differently. Just say ahead of time, hey, if you're in my class and you have a child who has some of these learning challenges, talk to me. How can I help? Like, have a lot of parents don't want to tell you. That's just my experience. I'm definitely open about it, but not everyone is. So if you provide that hospitality in your classroom right away, I think parents will say, oh, take a deep breath. This
Mhm.
person gets that my kid struggles.
And really embracing that partnership
Yes.
model between
Yes.
the parent and the tutor. Yeah,
Yes.
like that.
So, and one other thing, publicly celebrate. If you know you've got a kid who has learning challenges, publicly celebrate something they really did well. I cannot tell you how much that helped Jacob's self-esteem when he would come home and say, Mom, my director, or yeah, or my tutor, my director thought I did great with this, and it could be an arts, something artistic. I remember one time, he did something artistic that the tutor held up in front of the class and was so proud of Jacob, and that just made him just feel so special. So if you can find something to publicly celebrate, that's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, advice to parents, maybe particularly the dads.
Yes, 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 yes. Dads can often don't want to talk about a diagnosis. They don't want to hear that their child has a problem. They often can think that accommodations are a crutch, and uh, and that can be hard, especially for mom to deal with. Um, so I want to parents to keep in mind that kids with these struggles often work 3 times as hard to process information, and they get frustrated with these things. And so, as parents, we need to humble ourselves. And when our kids don't meet the expectation that we had, especially because there's weaknesses that we didn't expect, we just have to reevaluate how we're going to handle this student. I would encourage parents, especially the dads, to take time to look at the science and look at the therapies that are working. If you had a child like this, dyslexia really is a brain pattern issue. This is a physical issue. This is not a problem with a kid not trying hard enough. If you got a diagnosis that your child couldn't was going to lose the ability to walk or something, you're going to put a wheelchair ramp up to your house. You're not going to tell the kid, look at those steps. I need you to go up them and say you're not trying hard enough to go up the steps, and you can't walk. But I want you to walk. I'm gonna think really hard that you can have the ability to walk up those steps.
You
Nobody
just
would.
try hard enough
Right.
and if you
Don't, yeah,
don't
you're not
want it
trying hard
enough.
enough to, nobody would do that to a child who needed a wheelchair. So, it's just this dyslexia is because it's in the brain, we can't see it.
Mhm.
So we just need to, it's very important to know what dyslexia is, learn what it is. And there's tons of science out there now. Back when my brother was a tiny person, it was that research wasn't out there as much. So it was easier to say, oh, he's just got discipline problems. But
Mhm.
you, this is how you love your child. You learn to love all of them, even their weaknesses and hardest part. And honestly, this is what Jesus does for us, right? We all have we all
Yeah.
have struggles and weaknesses, and so we don't want our child to have to hide what their struggles are. So creating an open environment for mom and dad to love our children, this is like what Jesus does for us, and we need our home to be like that too. And I will say, I don't regret a single moment of the time I have sacrificed to support and equip my son. Not at all. It was hard. The burden felt unbearable at times, but I'm so grateful that God gave me a partner in CC to help me bear those burdens well.
Yeah. And so before we jumped on here, Marie, you shared with me just a little Jacob story that
Oh,
took place this morning.
yeah, it makes me cry.
Want
So,
to-
Jacob's at Liberty. It's finals week, and he took his final this morning. And at 8:30, he called me and asked me, "Mom, would you pray with me before I take my finals?"
Yeah.
And so we did. We had this precious moment this morning praying together, and that relationship where he calls mom to ask for prayer before a final, that was built going
Right.
back from the time he got his diagnosis till now. He knows that I love him, that I pray for him, and that this is something I will always be his cheerleader. I will always give him the support that he needs because that is the calling God has given me, is to help him bear that burden. It's his, all of our kids' burdens are our burdens. And we help our kids bear the burdens, and CC helped me bear this burden of having a very difficult child to teach. But I can't imagine having done it without classical conversations. And I'm so grateful, Amy, for the skills that CC provided for my son to help him go to college. I do not think he would be at Liberty right now without having the foundation and all the equipping that he got through classical conversations. And he left with his soul intact. He graduated from high school with confidence that God didn't make him as a mistake. And I
Yeah.
see so many students who go to public school with learning challenges that feel like they're stupid. And I know my son knows he struggles and that he has weaknesses, but he knows he's created beautifully for a purpose.
Right. Right. It reminds me of the Psalm of David, how he's been knit
Yes.
deeply from his
Yes.
mother's womb.
Yes.
And that is no different from any of our kids. They have been knit beautifully
Right.
from the womb by a sovereign God who
Yes.
is in control of every single detail
Yes.
of their lives, their brains, and their bodies. Um, so yeah, I appreciate that. Are there any last words that you want to share before we out?
Hmm. Well, I I didn't mention, so I've talked a lot about Jacob, but I just want to end with how CC trained me well to be confident, to be the confident teacher of my son and my son's best advocate. I learned that I am the expert in my son. So experts have a role, and I did end up reaching out to an expert. Margie Watkins was our therapist, who I also she also was a huge reason why Jacob is very successful, is successful today. But um, I will say that Cece helped me know that my husband and I are the experts in our children that God has given us, and that we have a responsibility to be faithfully equipped, and CC did faithfully equip us with the tools we needed to homeschool our children. And I have two other children with dyslexia, and God used my struggles with Jacob to help prepare me to teach his younger siblings too. They're not word blind, but I'm just so grateful for the experience and the tools that Cece gave me to learn how to dig in and be that advocate for Jacob.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Marie. Thank you for sharing the rest of your story with Jacob, the things that you learned through that journey of dyslexia, and how CC came alongside you as you successfully
Yeah.
homeschooled your son. That's awesome. Thank you.